I'm going to show you how to make super fun Easter or spring themed lollipops. They're really super simple, but tons of fun. They'd be perfect for an Easter get together or spring tea with your girlfriends, whatever the case may be. I promise it's going to be so simple, so fun, and you're going to love it. First thing you need to know about lollipops is everything, all of the ingredients get measured out. So right here, you can't really see it, but I've got my food scale. And what I'm gonna do is take my pot and set it on the scale and turn it on. And that's gonna bring it to 0. So then what I'm gonna do is put my ingredients directly into the pot. So the first ingredient in lollipops is glucose or corn syrup. Now when I'm making lollipops at the shop at Fiddlesticks, I don't use corn syrup. We use a non-GMO glucose that does not contain corn, so we're not using corn syrup, but this is the easiest thing to find if you're looking for your ingredients at the grocery store or at a craft store. You might find glucose that's in a little tub, but today we're gonna use corn syrup. And so what we're gonna do is pour this corn syrup directly in the pot, and we are looking for 200 grams of corn syrup or glucose. So I'm just watching it go up. Okay, so we've got 200 grams of glucose or corn syrup in the pot. So we're going to tare this back to 0. And then our next ingredient that's going in is pure cane sugar. And so we're going to put in 300 grams of sugar on top of our glucose. So that's 300 grams. And then the last ingredient in our lollipops is just water. So I'm going to do 112 grams of water onto this. So the key with the water is to pour it in really carefully so it doesn't splash your ingredients, your sugar anywhere. As long as you don't get sugar granules splashed up onto the side, you're good to go. You don't have to touch this again. So okay, so we've got our ingredients onto the cooktop. I'm turning this on. And so we're just gonna let this go. We're gonna let it come to a boil. You do not stir lollipop syrup. So at this point, everything is meshing well. We're just gonna leave it alone. That's probably the hardest part and also the easiest part of making lollipops. Just don't touch it. I know it's so tempting to stir it. So once this comes to a boil, normally I would put in my candy thermometer. But today I forgot my candy thermometer at the Fiddlesticks Candy Kitchen. So if you're like me and you don't have a candy thermometer hanging around, you might have one of these. This is a thermal thermometer. It's one of those things that you can like point at the wall and see what the temperature is. So this works for candy as well. So you can just point it right at your syrup and it's going to tell you what the temperature is. So that's really important when making lollipops because you're going to want your lollipop syrup to come to 305 degrees or about 310. So on your candy thermometer, typically it'll show you the hard crack temperature, and that's what you really want when you're making lollipops. So once this comes to a boil, if you've got a candy thermometer, you're gonna put it in there because everything will be bubbling up nice and beautiful. So while this is boiling, I wanted to share with you how we're going to add our strawberry flavor into the lollipop syrup. So you basically have 3 options. My personal favorite way to flavor lollipops is using a really good jam from a local jam maker. So if you've got somebody in your town that makes really super yummy jam, go to them first because their flavor is going to turn up in your lollipop the best. Now, if you don't have that handy, like I don't today, your next best bet is to use a flavor emulsion. This can be found in the baking section of any craft store. You'll see on the front it says Bakery Emulsion. This is a Lorian Gourmet brand. Now your third option, if you don't have an emulsion handy or you don't want to use an emulsion, your last option is to use these tiny little candy oils. It's from the same company, Lorian, and it's just a strawberry flavor oil. So the biggest difference with the oil versus the jam or the emulsion is when you're going to add it to your lollipop syrup. So if you're using a jam or an emulsion, you're gonna watch the temperature on your lollipop syrup, and when it gets to 290 degrees, that's when you're gonna add your flavoring in. If you're using the oil like this, you're gonna wait till it comes to the hard crack stage, about 305 degrees or so, and you're gonna pull it from the heat, and then you're gonna add in your oil. So the reason we do that is because the emulsion and the jam has some extra water that's gonna need to cook off, whereas the oil doesn't. Okay, so while our lollipop syrup is boiling, we're gonna go ahead and prep our molds to pour our syrup into when it's ready. So what I have here is a silicone mold. You can get these at local craft stores. Sometimes they'll be silicone, sometimes you'll see some that are the white plastic. Those will work great too. Just make sure it says it's rated for hard candy because that goes to a higher temperature. What I like to do with the silicone molds is have a small baking sheet about this size, and I put the mold on top because as we're pouring the lollipop syrup, we're gonna tap it to get all the bubbles out, and so it's just easier to do when you have this baking sheet here. And so lastly, before we pour anything in here, we've got to get our sticks in. And so I picked these really fun rock candy sticks. They're not normally meant for lollipops, but I thought they were really cute, especially for the Easter or spring theme. It just adds a little kind of earthy tone to your lollipops. So these are wooden rock candy sticks. You can find them at the local craft store. So I'm just going to place them into each mold, into the opening. And the top of the stick goes about halfway into the middle of the shape of the lollipop, and we're just using a 2-inch round here. So I've got all my sticks in, and that's basically it. We're ready to go. As soon as that lollipop syrup is done boiling, we're gonna pour it into this. So you definitely wanna have a glass measuring cup with a good handle and a pour spout. It makes it super simple to be able to pour your lollipop syrup into the molds and then also to reheat it in the microwave if the lollipop syrup cools down too quickly. All right, so our lollipop syrup just came off of the stove top, so it's still bubbling. I'm gonna go ahead and pour in my oil, my flavoring oil. And you've gotta be careful when you do this because sometimes it lets off a bit of steam and you can see it rising, or you might be able to, and some fumes with it. So kind of keep your face away, and I'm just stirring it in. Remember, we didn't stir anything up until now. Don't stir the syrup until you add in the flavor. So I'm just gonna stir it and let the steam roll off and keep going until all the bubbling stops. All right, so our lollipop syrup stopped bubbling. All of the flavor is mixed in really well. Now I want you to remember this is molten sugar. It is so hot. It looks really not scary, but it is really hot. Believe me, trust me, I've accidentally burnt myself several times with lollipop syrup and it hurts. It is over 300 degrees, so it's basically like sticking your hand in an oven that's liquid. So just be careful, don't let your kids do this part. We're gonna be super careful, but we're going to transfer the syrup, the lollipop syrup, from inside of this pot into our really helpful pouring measuring cup. So we're gonna do that now. So here's the thing about lollipop syrup. It's sticky, it's sugar, it's gonna make all these little strings, it's gonna be messy. You've just gotta embrace the mess. I feel like that's good life advice in general. Just embrace the mess, just go with it. You're gonna make a mess, but it's actually surprisingly easy to clean up. And as long as you take your empty pot and put it right into the sink with some water on it, it'll actually be really simple to wash out as long as you get water on it before it starts to harden. Okay, so if you were planning to add any coloring to your lollipops, this is the time that you would do it. You've got your lollipop syrup in your measuring cup. You would add gel food coloring into this to make it colored. You don't want to add liquid or water-based food coloring because it will just mess up your syrup. Don't do it. So use coloring gel, and you only need a teeny tiny bit. It'll go, a little bit will go a really long way. I'm not planning to add any color to our sprinkle lollipops, our Easter lollipops. I'm gonna leave it this color. I think the natural is kind of fun, especially if you're going for like a natural kind of maybe flower garden party, that sort of thing. Plus the sprinkles are gonna add all the fun color to it anyway. So now we're ready to pour. We've got our molds all set up with our sticks, and we've got our lollipop syrup. I like to use a little spatula to help, steady my hand. And what we're gonna do is we're only gonna fill these up about 3/4 of the way full because we wanna leave enough room for all of the sprinkles that we're gonna add, and then we're gonna end up topping it with some clear lollipop syrup so it holds the sprinkles in place. So we're gonna go ahead and pour these about 3/4 of the way full. Okay, so now our lollipop syrup has hardened. We let it cool all the way. And remember, it's only about halfway to 3/4 of the way full. And we're gonna go ahead and add our really fun spring sprinkles. So this is a mix from Neon Yolk. It's got some really fun like green looking grass and some little Easter egg looking pieces. So we're just gonna go ahead and sprinkle them all in. You could get really fancy here and really specific and make like a fun design or something, but I'm just gonna go ahead and sprinkle it in really easily, really quickly. Super simple, and it'll look super fun. So we've got our sprinkles in, and now here's the secret to making these sprinkles look really cool on your lollipop while making sure that they stay on is isomalt. So isomalt is a sugar substitute. It's also a really easy way to make your lollipops all sugar-free if you were to make your syrup completely out of isomalt. So it's a sugar-free sugar substitute, and you can find it at cake stores or specialty stores, that sort of thing. So I've just melted it down, and I'm just gonna pour it over top of all of these sprinkles. All right, so these are all set. They're nice and cool. You can kind of tap them and they're totally cooled off. So it's now just time to take them out of the mold, which is one of my favorite parts. So if you've got any of these little extra pieces, usually they just break right off really easily, and you can kind of clean up the edges, make it nice and pretty. So again, any of these little strings, they're super simple to take off, so no big deal. Look at that, little fun Easter lollipops.